Is it possible for black people to be racist? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Houston Ensemble podcast. We're on episode 26 right now. We've got a wonderful guest, kind of serendipitous actually, because I wanted to do something with Black Lives Matter Houston, and I didn't plan it at all, but we're actually doing it right at the beginning of Black History Month. So I thought that was a pretty cool idea, and we have on with us today Brandon Mack. He is a leader of Black Lives Matter Houston, and he was gracious enough to reach back to me and oblige us for a podcast. So Brandon, thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Brandon, just right off the bat, can you just tell us about yourself and how you got involved in Black Lives Matter and what you do and what's going on?
Sure. So I've been involved in activism for the past 15 years and specifically been involved in Black Lives Matter Houston since we were founded in 2013. My best friend is the founder of Black Lives Matter Houston, Ashton P. Woods. And the reason for why Black Lives Matter Houston was started was due largely in response to Mike Brown and what was going on in Ferguson. Mm-hmm. We were concerned about the fact that there was a need for a Black Lives Matter chapter here in Houston. And so together with Candace Weber, Chris Malone, Deanna Adams, the five of us collectively formed Black Lives Matter Houston, and we've been in existence ever since. We are about the uplift of the Black community here in Houston. We do that through activism as well as providing mutual aid. We've done responses to Harvey, as well as to the coronavirus, as well as advocating against police brutality and calling for government accountability. And we also work on legislative acts such as the Sandra Bland Act. We're also helping on the George Floyd Act here in Texas. And so what we are about is making sure that we have racial equity across Houston, but also across the world.
That's nice. And let's just get right into it. Are you tired of the government trying to calcify your pineal gland and turn you into nothing more than a working zombie? Look no further, because the Houston Ensemble has now been sponsored by the amazing Epic Water Filters. Tell us what they do, Armin.
Epic Water Filter is the only true filtration system you need. All these other filtration systems skip out on so many terrible chemicals and minerals that are still in your water and that you should not be drinking.
Fluoride, chromium, lead, all these other things that you do not want in your water. We've got water bottles with filters on them. We've got home installation filters. We've even got pitchers. Right now you can get 20% off any of these items on epicwaterfilters.com if you use our discount code Houston Ensemble, all lowercase, one word.
That's Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word, for 20% off your Epic Water Filter.
Like right off the bat, if you could tell the people, what do you want to achieve? What is the George Floyd Act? What are the tenets of the act? And, what is that all about?
Sure. So as we all know, last year, George Floyd, who was a native of Houston, was unfortunately murdered by the police. He was murdered using an illegal chokehold. So what the George Floyd Act intends is to bring about greater police accountability through the elimination of the use of illegal chokeholds. It would restrict qualified immunity, which gives police officers immunity from lawsuits, and would call for greater accountability. It would also institute more training as a step towards police being held more accountable and to have to educate themselves on interactions with people of color. And so are some of the central tenets of the act. Mm-hmm. It would strengthen the currently existing Sandra Bland law by once again putting in those restrictions on chokeholds and on qualified immunity. And so we're just trying to put in greater accountability measures, because currently what often happens is when acts like this are proposed, police officers' unions will use their authority to then lessen those types of measures so they don't have as many accountability measures, which would then give them more power to act negatively towards people of color and for acts that happened to George Floyd and others to continue to persist.
Do you think that justice was served in the George Floyd case?
Not at all. I think that we have to be very clear what happened in that situation. That was a murder.
Yeah, I agree.
Many people, and I had a conversation with someone on another podcast where they had a member of a police officers union who did not want to even call it an illegal chokehold, and I'm like, no, we're gonna call it what it is because
the knee.
Yeah, the knee on his neck. We're going to call it what it is because when you don't call things what they are, it gives people the license and ability to then mishandle and to be untruthful, which then leads them to be able to perpetuate these same negative actions. So what was done to George Floyd was a murder. The fact that the police officers have been charged is a good step, but what we're still waiting to see is, are they going to go through a full prosecution? Because as we saw with Breonna Taylor, nothing really happened to the officers in her case. The charge that the officers did get weren't for shooting her. It was for shooting bullets into the apartment next to her. So we continue to see a fundamental problem of devaluation of Black life, not only here in Houston, not only in Texas, not only in the United States, but anti-Blackness and the devaluation of Black people is a worldwide problem. So that's the reason for why it is important that we do hold people accountable and that we do actually see justice being done.
Agreed. Do you think that, I feel like that problem of, just occurrences with the police, violence, unnecessary death kind of happens a lot in general. And it happens to all people, I would say. Are you familiar with a Tony Timpah?
Not as familiar.
Okay, so Tony Timpah, just as like a comparative type thing, Tony Timpah was a man who called the police, and he's a white guy, and they came in and they ended up doing that exact same knee on the neck to him for a long time, and he ended up dying. And unfortunately, also, while they were doing that, they were even making fun of him and like being like, come on, man, get up, blah, 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 blah. What's even crazier is that they were not charged at all. And so I think about the George Floyd thing, and then I think about something like that. And you don't know who Tony Timpah is, which is interesting because I don't think many people do. You'd actually have to go and look about it. And what I'm worried about is that, or maybe being like one-dimensional about it, where it's like, I feel like the police need a lot more training in general. They need more rigorous training. They need to be vetted even a little bit more. And if they have some crazy biases, like Derek Chauvin, I feel like there was something, maybe he was into a white supremacy thing. I'm not really sure. But I'm seeing it all over. Do you think that George Floyd should be the poster child of this?
Well, that's the thing, is that there really isn't a poster child for any of this. This is a systemic problem, meaning that this has been a problem that has not only persisted just last year, but for hundreds of years. So that's the reason for why, even though there are these one-off cases where there are individuals who are Caucasian, other races where this happens, yes, they are similar, but the problem is that this has consistently happened towards Black people for over hundreds of years. And what we also have to be cognizant of the fact is, how did policing start, and how is that relationship between policing and Black people has been for the duration of policing in the United States? Because I always have to remind people that when policing was started, they were the early slave catchers. So they automatically, inherently looked at Black people as being negative, didn't even look at Black people as being human. And that has perpetuated itself over these years, irrespective of training, irrespective of adding people of color to the force, because that culture and that connection and identification of Black people as not being human has been perpetuated throughout this entire time, which is the reason for why you see the calls for defunding the police, abolishing the police, because if we keep giving into this system, but we're not dealing with the root cause that you don't fundamentally find Black people to be equal, that's the reason for why we can't keep saying, oh, train them, because that fundamental issue still is not going to be addressed through training. It has to be addressed with this system has to change, which is the reason why you see those calls. But that's the reason why I think it's important for us to really think of the context, because yes, individual cases are going to matter, but there isn't one poster child. It's just the fact that we keep seeing this happen. And one thing that I really want to point out, especially when it comes to George Floyd and why that particular situation was amplified the way that it was, is because of the fact we already saw a very similar case like that with Eric Garner, who was in New York City, who literally it was related to cigarettes, related to a convenience store. He also said he couldn't breathe, another illegal chokehold being used, video being seen, and calls for police accountability. And there were these thoughts that, oh, we're going to have Obama's 21 century police task force. We're going to have new training. We're going to have new measures of police accountability. And 4 years later, here we are once again with this same issue. So that's the reason why I think you're seeing the amplification that you saw, was because it was so similar. And yet no amount of training seemed to have gone into preventing what we saw in Minneapolis.
So with what you're saying there, would you say that all police, and I'm just going off based on what you said, would you say that all police are inherently racist?
I wouldn't necessarily say that all police are inherently racist. I would say that the police system is inherently racist. So there's a difference between the individual officer, because often, honestly, that's what people are going to always say, is that, oh, that one officer isn't racist, and that can be true. But the system of policing
and is
racist.
What does that mean?
What I mean by that is, what are the assumptions inherently that most police officers base their decisions off of? Most of those assumptions are going to be based inherently in racism, because you're going to say, oh, these statistics, the way that we look at who's arrested and things of that nature, that whole system is based in racism, because it's based in, we don't view black people as being the same. We inherently automatically think black people are negative. We're looking for black people before we're looking for anybody else.
The police system is saying that.
Exactly. So that's the reason why there's a difference between the system and individual officers. But there are going to be those officers who do carry out racism and who have racist beliefs, but then you're now giving them a weapon, and you're giving them a system that's already racist that enables them to do what it is that they do.
And I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Go for it.
My mom, and you might not be able to tell by my skin color, is black, stepmom, and gay, and a police officer.
Right on.
In Cincinnati, Ohio. She's retired now, but she just retired a couple years ago. And, I've talked a lot about this with her, because that is a perspective. One, woman, black, gay.
Right.
Police. That's a lot.
That's an uphill battle that I'm pretty sure that she had to fight with, being a part of that system and trying to, change a system where it's, like I said, the system itself is already inherently racist. So even if you are a person of color coming with all of that and trying to change that particular system, you're having to battle a system and then those other individuals that are a part of it. So I'm pretty sure she saw some things.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she has. And she, in Cincinnati, my hometown, it's interesting. It is a very liberal city, and actually the Cincinnati Police Department, like the Metro type police department, is very it's got a large population of officers of color. And what was cool for her is actually she was pretty much second in command with the chief.
Nice.
So she was really up there. And also all of our police chiefs, like the past 2 or 3, I'm gonna go with 2, have been black in Cincinnati. And what's really unfortunate is the one where my mom was the public informations officer for him. He's black. And he was racist towards his own people. And so maybe that is an example of how the system could be racist.
Exactly.
But another thing is, then I go and I think about, okay, I'm going to put my perspective in the police perspective. And you're out and about, and I got a story from last night that I want to share with you, because it's very much about the police in our neighborhood. And they're out and about, they're nervous. Doesn't matter who the person is that they're going to see. Like, if they get a call, they're going to be nervous about it. And if the person starts to act up, they're just not complying. Well, I know that I'd be a little more like on edge too. And then you have somebody like George Floyd, who, was not in the proper state of mind necessarily, and because I guess he was high, but
I don't think that that's been substantiated. First off, I want to just point that clear that he was not in any type of state in which he, was impaired in any type of way or anything of that nature. So I just want that to be clear.
He wasn't impaired?
As far as I know from everything that I've read, I don't believe that he was impaired in that state in which he was interacting. So
okay, and I wasn't there, so I don't know one way or the other. So we got both. Let's say whatever, he's not. The problem is then, okay, he's big and he's not complying and he's not getting in. Now, that is no excuse to put a chokehold on somebody and kill them. Mm-hmm. Not one bit. But at what point are you like, well, what do we do? What do you think we do in that situation where they don't comply? And George Floyd is just one example.
Right.
1 million people, white, black, Mexican, Chinese, not many Chinese people are dealing with the cops. But, they're not complying, and there are repercussions for that.
Well, here's the thing, is that the onus is always put on people to be the ones who are supposed to comply. Where's the onus going to be put on police officers to come up with better ways of engaging with people? Because it always starts off with, how are they engaging with people, right? Mm-hmm. Because it is easier, I think, for you to comply when you come at it from a place of respect, rather than an automatically elevated position. Because I always find it interesting that cops always talk about, we're trained in de-escalation. Well, the situation's not equal when we come into contact with people. You're coming into a situation where you have a weapon, you have the law behind you. So you have a position of authority that's very different than the person that you're interacting with. So you expect them to automatically yield to you, and yet you're acting in an elevated position depending on any number of things. So it always depends on the circumstance, but at the same time, I always find it interesting that the paradigm is we're always expected to be the ones who come at it as being, you need to go ahead and just de-escalate and comply, when why isn't it that the police are not always coming at it with a respectful way? Now, granted, it's going to depend on the particular situation, but at the same time, I think that that's one of the problems, is that you're always putting the onus on people to be the ones, whereas cops can come into the situation and elevate the situation, and it's just trying to be at an equal footing so that we all can resolve the situation.
And they do, definitely make mistakes and elevate the situation unnecessarily sometimes. But I would say if we are living, I feel like we just have to, and I'm not over here being like, I get nervous when the police are around. Even when my guitar, all my gear was stolen one time, and we actually found the person who stole it, and we're trying to get it back. Then we called the police. Actually, he called the police on us. And by the way, it's on video, so it wasn't a conjecture or anything like that. They were kind of intense on us. And I'm like, whoa.
Right.
That was my stuff that was stolen. He took it. It's on video right here. But I do feel like if we're living in a society that needs a police force, then we do have to concede that the citizen that's being dealt with by the police is the one who does have to step down and comply.
But I would also say we need to also reevaluate our need for police. And in what instances do we need police? Because we don't need police in every single instance. Because in all honesty, police don't necessarily prevent crimes. Oftentimes their job is to come and basically collect that information, and that's it. Right. So that's the other thing that I think that we also need to challenge ourselves in thinking about, is why do we feel the need for police, and in what ways do we need to utilize police? Because oftentimes, I always question this, is that when they say we're here to protect and serve, that is not necessarily the case, because it's like, who are you here to be in protect and service of? Because if you ask many black people, we're not the ones you're centering when you're thinking about protecting and serving. You're centering other people, or you're centering this property over my life.
Yeah, and I would even go a little bit further than just saying not black people. I would probably say more low income.
That too.
And there's a high percentage of black people in low income, but it applies to everybody, especially in a city like Houston, where it's so big and it's the most diverse city. Now, I'm going to tell you the story from last night. So this is a low income area. We're low income. That's why we're here. But we got a great studio, and that's why we came here. we're sitting outside, maybe like 1 a.m. last night, and we're just sitting on the porch, and we hear a little something, and we look down the street, a house and a half, and we realized that these 3 guys had gone up to this car that was parked there and broke the window. And they just did a little window bash thing. Immediately got in the car and drove off. I said, well, I'm going to move my car from the street to the driveway. I'm going to my car, and then I see lights coming down the street again. And I'm like, whoa, is that the same car? And it was the same car, and they were circling back again. And I'm in my car. I pull into the driveway. Thankfully, I've got my piece on me, so we're not worried about it. But I'm pulling in, and they pulled just past our driveway a little bit, to maybe a couple cars down. And they just sit there. And thankfully, Armin came back outside to just kind of watch.
Right.
And they just sat there. And then they left once we were just standing there kind of watching. And then moments later, and I'm not saying it was them, but moments later we heard gunshots right around the corner. And so we're like, well, what do we do? And they're like, well, he got everything on the car, so let's call the police. Call it into the area. We just witnessed a robbery. We heard gunshots. We need police in the area to patrol, especially because we're right next to this club, which is bumping every night. So that was an instance last night where I was like, okay, that makes me feel better about having police in the area. What do you say to that?
So the things that I would say to that is, in that particular instance, what I'm immediately thinking of is a lot of the other systemic issues that surround what occurred. So I'm thinking of
like why they're robbing.
So first off, the why they're robbing is that from a place of lack, and how do we address lack? Because oftentimes that is what happens when people engage in criminal behavior or perceived criminal behavior, is because of the fact that they're having to solve something related to lack. So is that because this individual does not have access to education, which then doesn't give them access to jobs to where they feel that they have to steal? Is this because of a fact that they are so I will deal with that first. But what the other thing is that I would think of is, you know, if cops were patrolling in the area, what could they do in that particular situation? You know, maybe it could prevent them from in terms of engaging in that particular behavior. But for me, the thing is that is one instance in which case they're doing their quote unquote job of protecting property, which could have prevented it. But at the same time, we got to deal with the root causes that lead to people engaging in criminal acts, and that's often where I feel like we mess up. As a society, is that we don't deal with that. Instead, what we automatically want to do is be reactive to the situation, which is then lock them up. And then you're just perpetuating the cycle, because then once they're locked up, they have a criminal record. They're not able to get a job. They now feel even more of a sense of loss, and now they're going to engage in recidivism. So why are we not doing things to where we can improve our society to where people don't feel the need that their automaticness is to go and rob somebody?
I agree with that. I'll say one thing and then you say it. The only thing I say to that is we want to be careful that we're not essentially giving them an exemption to rob people because they are in a hard situation.
I don't think it's an exemption, though. What I think it is once again, why are we not addressing the root causes of the situations that lead people to robbing? It's not an exemption.
I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah. Very clear. But I also wanted to make it clear that I'm not suggesting that it is an exemption.
Gotcha.
It is that my approach to thinking about these situations is, once again, the root causes that led to that. These individual actions is often what happens when people don't want to deal with the root causes. They just want to deal with the individual situation. My assertion is, let's just stop focusing on the individual situation to be like, oh, that one issue is the reason we don't deal with the larger issue. It's like we gotta focus on these larger issues to prevent these smaller individual actions from happening.
Agreed.
So I've got a lot to say.
Go for it.
But I'm gonna start out kind of simpler. So first of all, my question is, can we do both? Because the thing is, we're standing outside, we're watching these guys break into cars, and presumably they might be armed, presumably whatever. We don't know anything. If I had a magic wand and precognition and I was omniscient and I could go and I can do this and then their lives would be better, that would be amazing.
Yes.
But I can't. The only thing I can think at that moment is my neighborhood is not safe.
Right.
Can I call the cops in that situation?
Whether or not you choose to call the cops is not for me to say. What I'm saying is that yes, we need to do both. We need to deal with the systemic issues, and then that leads to changes that happen at the individual level. You can clearly do both, right? You can clearly do both in terms of dealing with systemic issues where cops are trained and are treating people better. You can also deal with the systemic issue of where are we doing to make sure that people are not consistently dealing with lack, where we're addressing food insecurity, where we're addressing educational inequalities that would then lead people to having a better quality of life, which would then lead them not to have to feel that they need to steal. All these things can be done simultaneously. The problem that I find is that when individuals try to do systemic change, they come in with these one little instances to be the justification as to not make systemic change. They're like, oh, we have to deal with the fact that we have a high crime area, which therefore justifies that police is the solution for that high crime area. When I'm saying, does it have to always be police as being your go-to? It doesn't always have to be police as your go-to.
Oh, yeah.
It can be, let's deal with some of these issues while at the same time protecting ourselves and protecting the situation, but also building a better compassionate society that would lead to us not doing that. And then on top of that, if that one actor, don't know the race and ethnicity of who that was, but also the treatment of the way that people are treated in this criminal justice system, that person could easily, be someone who's perpetually doing this, but because of the color of their skin, they're not getting punished in the same way that someone else would if they did a one-time thing and then they're locked up for the rest of their lives. Whereas this person, judge is like, oh, you poor person here who is from a very privileged situation. Oh, you just did it one time? Cool. I'm going to let you off because you have this privilege and power, and I don't believe that you're going to do this over again, when in reality, they're the ones who constantly are doing acts like that. But then that's the reason why I'm like, there's so many of these inequities that need to be addressed. But the thing is, we got to address the inequity. We got to address the inequity at the same time of also protecting ourselves and also thinking about, well, what exactly are going to be the best and effective ways to do that? Because consequently, you could have had a cop there. They may or may not have decided, because the cop is there, I'm not going to rob this. But at the same time, they could have been dealing with lack so badly that they're like, irrespective of that cop being there, I need whatever is in that car.
Yeah.
Well, I would say sell your car first if you're dealing with that much lack.
I was gonna ask this, and Chad, you have the floor, but this is a complex question.
Very much so.
And maybe this one in particular might be going into the metaphysic realm, but like when we say about addressing the core issues, let's say we all made like a massive effort on addressing the systemic issues. Okay. Do you think that would actually eliminate ill will? So for example, I'm of the belief that most people are born like pretty much good. Like most kids, you know what I'm saying? They're innocent, they're cuddly, they're cute, they're smiling and laughing, okay?
Sure.
And then we add the negative stuff on them later.
Okay.
Right? Like we teach them racism. We'll teach them, hey, don't look at that guy, don't
Right.
look at that guy. Right? But then I wonder about the percentage of people that are simply not wired to be good. And I'm not talking about a race. I'm just talking about human beings.
Or you can even have a biological problem that will create
precisely. Neurological,
a violent thing.
biological,
Could be
violence,
something, right? Could be
pathology.
something related to mental illness and things of that
Right,
nature.
exactly. So I guess, can we create a world where we don't need law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
That's huge.
That's huge. You know what I'm saying?
And I think we can create that world. And I think that we have to be open to creating that world.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where oftentimes that's the issue, is that because we haven't, been open to creating that world. We're not open to the possibilities of there being alternative solutions. So, for example, out of Eugene, Oregon, they came up with a system called Cahoots, which is where instead of it being a police officer who is responding to a particular situation, it is a mental health professional who is responding to a particular situation, especially when there are issues that are clearly this person is going through a mental health episode. So rather than it being someone who is not trained, who's coming into it and escalating the situation with a gun, expecting someone to comply when they don't have the mental ability to be able to, quote unquote, comply. You have someone who is more trained, who is able to address the situation in a different way that doesn't lead to them being locked up, them being potentially killed or shot or something of that nature, but then dealing and addressing with that particular situation. That's one of the ways in which you can reimagine how do we address these situations where it doesn't involve law enforcement, but does involve an intervention or someone coming in and handling the situation in a very different way. So that's the reason for why I say that if we want to create that world, we got to be open to those solutions that would enable that. Right now, oftentimes, I think people, because we have gotten so reinforced in thinking police is our only solution, we're not giving ourselves that space to think there's another way we could be addressing this.
But with that idea of you saying that you think that we could have a world without police, that means that you're assuming that humans can obtain a level of altruism that would create a crime-free society.
It's a possibility.
And I want that 100%, 100%.
But also at the same time, the word police is also the thing. It could be another solution, right? It's not necessarily
okay. So you're thinking about renaming it.
Exactly. Not necessarily renaming it. It would be renaming it and also it being a different system,
thing.
Right? So that's the reason why I'm just saying police as we currently know it, not the solution.
Do we have an example of a mental health professional or a de-escalation tactician or strategist actually coming in lieu of the police and de-escalating a situation? Do we have an example of that?
As I mentioned, that particular program that I mentioned that's being operated out of Eugene, Oregon, is also being implemented in other areas. So I would say definitely look into that.
Social workers can kind of be an example of that, and I'm all on board with that. I think that is a really important thing where, there are instances where the police don't have to come, and actually for example, domestic violence calls are actually the most dangerous thing for police officers to go into. My mom's really good friends were called to a domestic violence thing, and two big guys, police officers, going in. There was violence between the couple. They walked into the house. The guy was hiding behind the door and shot both of them in the head. And so that, doesn't matter in that situation if it's police, if it's a social worker, if it's a whatever. That guy in that house at that time said, I'm going to kill my wife and I'm going to kill whoever's next and then I'm going to kill myself. And so unfortunately, when I'm thinking about this utopian future that we're talking about, I don't think it's actually possible because we do have people in our society that act like that. And, there's a great story regarding the biological deficits for some people. It's in this book by Sam Harris, talking about biological determinism, aka like knowing what actions somebody's going to take before they take it. Actually, sorry, wrong book. That's a cool thing. But this one is Robert Sapolsky, all about human biology, why we do what we do, but they're related books. This guy killed his whole family, killed himself, but wrote a suicide note before that and said, something feels off with me. Please try and find out what it is when I'm dead. They did the autopsy, and then they found that he had a really large tumor pressing on his amygdala. And the amygdala is in charge of kind of your aggression and a lot of your emotional state. And so that's another example of why we may need some sort of, a net just in case something happens like that, because maybe a person has a tumor on their amygdala and then goes crazy.
And the thing that I want to be very clear is that I'm not saying that we don't have any type of system. What I'm saying is that we have a system that is not based in racial inequity as the system that we currently have, and to not be against changing that system, because currently there is so much wrong with the current system of policing, but what honestly keeps happening is people are not willing to change it. They're not willing to hold police accountable. They're not willing to change the methods by which we address issues. Instead, they just say these one-off particular situations is the justification of why we need to keep feeding into this system. And do you know who keeps getting negatively impacted by this system? Black people. And we're just at a place where we're finally saying, no, this system has got to change, because we're the ones who are constantly being disproportionately negatively impacted by this system. So that's the reason for why I never understand when it's like, okay, you have the statistics, you have the facts that clearly show they're shooting and killing us. You now want to give more money for them to do what? To continue shooting and killing us. So that's why I find it always funny when people get into the conversation about why they're anti-defund the police and anti-abolishing of the police, when I'm like, okay, you're going to be fine, because they're not coming for you. They don't inherently look at you as being negative. Me and people who look like me, they inherently look at me as being negative. So what is your response? So what are people's response to that? Just deal with it, and I'm supposed to be okay with people coming in and fundamentally devaluing my life? No, not going to be okay with that.
I assume I know what you'll say, and this isn't like a jab or anything like that. It's just purely for the conversation. Would it be possible that there's a black police officer that is inherently against me, or is that not possible?
So that is not necessarily racism, because first and foremost, you have to be in a power and privilege position in order for there to be racism. And granted, you could say that with the cop being in a power and privileged position, acting in that way. But like I said, from a systemic standpoint and from a number standpoint, that is one instance that doesn't negate the history of what has happened. So that's the reason why I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily make that, because that would be a false equivalency.
Right. I guess the way I totally understand that. I think the way that I'm thinking about it is essentially just in the now. Not necessarily thinking about every action that led up to this moment, but just because we are in now. And there are, some, I don't know, like,
I'll just tell you this. I don't see it happening in the now. I don't see black police officers disproportionately killing white people.
Either.
I don't see black police officers disproportionately disrespecting white people. What I see is a disproportionate amount of black death and a disproportionate amount of disrespect of black and brown bodies. So that's the reason for why that one instance is not gonna even remotely come close to what is on visual display and on historical display.
Is it possible? So based on what you're saying about racism coming from a position of power, is it possible for black people to be racist?
No, black people cannot be racist.
What?
Black people can be prejudiced.
So
black people cannot be racist, because
Gotcha.
Racism is about power and the ability to use systemic structures. So we never had control of this government. We never had control of these laws. So hence, we don't have the same ability to be able to use these structures to justify enslavement, to justify using the laws that would then result in you being in prison. So that's the reason for why I have to be very careful when people ask that question. And I'm like, from the way this country has been created, black people can't be racist. We can be prejudiced, because anybody can have preferences, attitudes, and things of that nature that they then use to then, justify the way that they act on people. But as far as using systems to oppress people, we do not have access and control to be able to do that.
Gotcha. I was just under the impression that the definition of racism was considering one race superior to another race.
It's also about the ways in which the society is structured to use those systems to act upon people also. So that's the reason for why it's to act upon people. So that's the reason why racism is a systemic problem. It's not just an individualized problem. It can be, but for the most part, it is a system-wide problem.
Okay. I think
or societal problem.
I think people that would be listening would have questions because it's hard, because I don't think that opinion is universally held. Your definition of racism.
I would venture for them to
I'm sure a lot of people think that.
And I would venture them, and once again, everyone's going to have different opinions and things of that nature, a lot of times just to justify what their particular positions are, and people are welcome to think that I have that too. But if you go and look at sociological definitions related to racism, is going to be about a systemic issue and the ways in which systems operate within a society rather than it being solely individual actors.
Well, you know what concerns me is there's no question to me that there's racism. There's no question to me that there's prejudice. What I'm more concerned about is who are we letting decide what the language is and what the parameters are for how we keep things accountable, who we keep accountable, what the words do we use. Like when I look at people defining, for example, I don't trust politicians. So if I hear a politician talk about these matters, my spidey senses are tingling.
Sure.
And so, is there any amount of this? I'm not sure how to ask this question, but I'll put it to you this way. Do you ever feel like there is a rhetoric or a story that's being spun in this country constantly in order to get us to basically hate each other?
I think that there are some individuals who do engage in that, where they're constantly trying to paint a have versus have-nots, a this versus that. I definitely think that there are individuals who do that, and I see it manifesting itself in a variety of different ways. But I would say that as far as Black Lives Matter, we're not in that. We are about, once again, making sure that we combat the devaluation of ourselves. And as I like to say, we're trying to create Wakanda in a world that is trying to center Captain America.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's interesting. But let me say this, because I had this thought earlier. I don't want to forget. When I came to this country, I immigrated from Russia. And I was about 7, 8, and I didn't know English. So when I came in, not knowing English, you could imagine I'm just confused. I don't know what's going on. You know? And one of my first friends here was a kid named Adorian. His family was Nigerian, I think, first generation. And they were all professionals. Mother was a doctor, father was a lawyer. And I'm hanging out with a Dorian, and this is about 3 or 4 months in. I'm finally starting to like really get the hang of the language. I'm pretty fluent. And what I notice is that a Dorian and some of his friends, they're talking, and this is when I hear it, and I'm very confused by this. I hear them say, I just don't like white people, man. I just can't handle them, and these fucking honkies, these blah, 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 and they're just going at it, and they're kids. And I don't even understand most of the words they're saying at the time. Later on, I remember, and I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about, that. And then later on, I met some of them, and this isn't a Dorian saying that. Dorian was a really great kid. It's these some other kids that I think were being vetted by gangs at the time. Later on, I come to find out one of those kids passed away recently.
Were they Nigerian or were they American?
No, the Nigerian. I mean, those are just Adorian's parents. I was just saying for background.
Oh, okay.
But whatever the case may be, the point I'm trying to make is, it is at that point that I realized that for some reason there's a me versus them here that I didn't even realize there was. And then And then from that point onwards, I became more and more aware that the school at the time I was in, Askew Elementary, at the time was very, the demographic was pretty mixed, but there's definitely a lot of Latino and Black population in there as well. And so I'll tell you right now, I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't feel like I had friends anymore. And I certainly didn't feel like I had any amount of leverage socially in that situation. And I thought that I felt for the first time like I didn't have any friends here. These people are not on my side. And I had no idea what to do about it. So I guess, is that racism? Or is that still prejudice, and like where's the line here, I guess?
So what I would say in that particular situation is that would be an example of dealing with prejudice, in the fact that they automatically had a belief about you that was based off of, their experiences, things of that nature, and they decided based off of that experience that I am not going to necessarily engage. What would be the racism is that the fact that those individuals who thought that, what are the systems that they're having to operate that they didn't create? So like, for example, if you're a Black student who goes to any number of high schools and things of that nature, or anything in K through 12, and you have resource officers who automatically look at you as being negative, who automatically are trying to do things towards you, when you and your fellow classmates do the exact same thing, but yet you're the one who gets punished harsher versus that person being let off. All those things are going to lead to your own beliefs, because you're operating in systems that you and people like you didn't have a handle in creating, but you're expected to operate under. But and yet you have these disproportionate feelings, and then on top of that, we're always having to worry about, oh, well, how are they going to feel? When they never think about how we feel. So that's the reason for why it's going to be different, in that is prejudice, because that is an individual situation. The system, that's where where it would be racist, in terms of if the school was acting upon you, if someone like that was doing that. But in that particular situation, you're dealing with prejudices, and frankly, prejudices are something that an individual can necessarily overcome. That system, and that's a harder thing to overcome. So I'm like, these are all things that are really tied together, and it's hard to kind of, describe even, within a podcast and situation here. But my problem, like I say, that comes in is when these individual situations are then used once again to not deal with bigger issues. Because here's the thing. If those individuals, for example, if you had went and told somebody what you had experienced, immediately you probably would have saw action happen.
I'll tell you.
Not necessarily. I'm just saying, for example, more than likely you would have saw action happen with respect to protecting you. If something had happened to those students, it more than likely, given just what I'm saying has happened in our society and the way generally things operate, it's less likely that things would have happened immediately protecting those people. That's the issue that I'm trying to address. That's the issue that I'm really wanting more people to focus on, is why is there always an immediacy that happens when it's like something's happening to white people, we need to immediately act. Something happens to Black people, oh, do we act or not?
I hear you. And this is not a rebuttal towards what you just said, but I can tell you right now, those same kids later tried to beat the shit out of me, and I reported that, and absolutely nothing was done. As a matter of fact, I was laughed at because I think my English was weird still, and they had a hard time understanding me, and they thought I was making something up or something, or playing a joke, and I was like, these two kids just punched me, laughed, and ran off. And they're like, what?
And I also think that that's also indicative of a bigger issue that happens in our country also when it comes to people from an immigrant experience not being equally as valued as well, which is also the reason for why Black Lives Matter, we work in conjunction with other communities that are also dealing with systemic oppressions, because our systemic oppressions are individual, but they're also tied to each other. So if we want to see an increase in the valuation of Black people, we need to also see an increase in the valuation of other minority groups,
All right,
including individuals from the immigrant experience. So that's the reason for why, once again, we have to see that our oppressions are tied to each other rather than just being in isolation. And often that's what will happen. Like, for example, when we're trying to say, is this racist versus is this prejudice? It's like, how about is it wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then if it's wrong, what can we collectively do to help fix this wrong so that we're all not having to deal with this same type of crap?
Parenting.
That too.
You just hit. That's a
And that's a big one.
Extremely so.
Because also, why are families not treated the same way or valued the same way? I mean, there are actually documented reports that say that inherently the black family is somehow deficient and is used to justify the ways in which we treat black families. And
What are you saying deficient?
So, like, for example, the Moynihan Report, for those who don't know what it is, definitely Google it, but basically saying that inherently black families are somehow deficient because of, and they tie it to race. But that report has been used to justify all sorts of laws, all sorts of other actions that we as black people then have to deal with. And it's like, we're not inherent, because on top of that, we are not a part of the system that fundamentally disbanded our families, such as slavery.
Or even when they say, I've heard of the Moynihan Report, but I'm not really aware of what's in it. When they say deficient, do they mean that, are they really saying that black people are like inherently, I don't
like
know,
less responsible, less capable of raising productive citizens, all that kind of crap?
Are they saying that based on like
and that our family structures are somehow less than compared to other family structures, all sorts of things like that?
Are they saying that with a father and mother present in a home? Okay, well that
with a
sounds
father
weird
and
to
mother
me.
present, and then also saying that that's the reason why you see more women-led homes, and justifying that black men are not present and things of that nature. All those kind of racist tropes are in that report.
You listen to. Do you want to go?
No.
It's interesting for me. Have you ever listened to like a Thomas Sowell?
Mm-mm.
You don't know who Thomas Sowell is?
Mm-mm.
He's in his 80s now, and he is a scholar, professor, black guy. I'm forgetting where he's a professor at, or where he was a professor at. Really smart guy, but I've listened to him talk a lot, and he just goes, purely academic on it. And he talks a lot about, you should check this out, about how the structure of the family, he's speaking for black people because that's his experience, but he's extrapolating it to all peoples. That the structure of the family is so important, and that the destruction of the home / family, especially in this modern era, like probably 60s onward, is when we really start to see that happen. Because let's go with pre-1970, pre-1960, the marriage rates among black people were the highest, actually. The black family had the best marriage rate. Today, that's not the case. And obviously, divorce is like about 50% right now.
It's like 60%.
Okay, more. So obviously, that's not working out. And we're seeing that. And when a child doesn't have strong role models on either side, that's not going to do them good. And what's interesting for me is I personally think a lot about that because I have two moms.
Right.
But I had a dad. I was my mom and dad were married for, I don't know, 16 years or something like that. But that was before they had me, and then they had me, and I think they divorced 8 years into me, something like that. And then my dad died when I was in high school. So my most formative years, and he was really, really old. So I got a good father figure, but I didn't get like somebody who was there 24/7, like full energy and that kind of stuff. And my really formative years were created by my mom and my stepmom. And I always think about that. I'm like, well, I turned out pretty well. But I made it a big point, one, to see my dad as much as I could. And then two, I had other really strong male role models in my life. And I think that you don't necessarily need a father and a mother in the home 100% to make perfection, but you definitely need strong role models or a strong unit. And we're missing that today, or it's declining a lot today. And it's specifically declining in the black community?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's specifically declining in the black community.
Let me say the numbers are much lower than they were.
What I would say is that once again, we got to think about history in terms of black people weren't always allowed to marry, first and foremost. Black people weren't
we're talking post 1970.
Even then, there still have been barriers that have prevented us from engaging in marriages and then also having access to other things that would be able to sustain a family. So then you're dealing with educational inequalities, you're dealing with job inequalities, you're dealing with all these other things that help make it harder to be able to sustain a family, while on top of that being automatically viewed as negative, which then leads to criminalization, which then leads to all these other problems. That's the reason why all these things are tied together.
I agree. When you say, I'm not aware of the making it hard to marry thing, so if you could let me know what in the era that I'm talking about, because I for sure know in the past, and even like, white and black people weren't even allowed to get married.
Exactly.
Up in Alabama until like 1980, 90, something like that, like a crazy. Now, they were still doing it because everybody kind of forgot, but at the same time, the fact that that law was even on the books is insane. What are you talking about when you're talking black people were hindered from marriage post like 1970?
Even with what I'm talking about is all those things before then made it harder for the post 1970 marriages and things of that nature to happen. So what I'm saying is that you did see a boom in terms of that in the 60s because civil rights movements going on. That made, those things opened up doors in terms of giving people the access and the ability to be able to get married. But also, you're asking people who have had a governmental structure be used against them to then trust it with the creation of families and things of that nature. What is being done to help inspire that? So that's what I'm saying is that, and like I said, this is a very hard thing to be able to contextualize because it's all connected. But that's the reason for why even when we're thinking about numbers and qualifications and things of that nature, it's not all equal. It's not all based on a thing to where you can make these equal comparisons.
The only thing that I have to say to that is I'm still taking into account that the black marriage rate pre that era was the highest out of any race in America. So I don't necessarily understand that, but what somebody like Thomas Sowell is saying is that in this era, okay, now we're like post 1960, what the programs that were being created by the government were actually disincentivizing the family unit. And actually we're still seeing that today, and it's under the guise of aid, but what it does is it creates the incentive to not have a family or have children out of wedlock or something like that for money, to get more money. And all I'm saying is, like, I think that just needs to be addressed, and I think that we need to stress the importance of raising kids properly. But what I was going to say to you is because we're talking about like laws and all that crazy stuff, and we just had the election. You voted for Trump, right?
No.
Are you serious?
No.
I'm just kidding with you. I just want to mess with you. JB and Kamala. I really wanted Tulsi Gabbard. Are you familiar with Tulsi?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, why? Okay, tell me.
I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and I have a problem with Tulsi Gabbard.
Because of her trans military thing? She's not for trans people going in the military.
Right.
Okay, that's a huge, deep thing. I say, fine, do it. Put trans people go to the military. Do your thing. That's a slippery slope. I mean, there's a lot going on internally, and we want to keep them safe. And that's a big part of your life that you're changing. So I understand that there's some rocky water with that, but more importantly, she's for the people. She's rational. She's not crazy. She's not getting all these sex scandals. She's vegan. What?
I have nothing to say about Tulsi Gabbard.
So you hate her?
I wouldn't say that. I have nothing to say about Tulsi Gabbard.
How about Joe Jorgensen? Do you know Joe Jorgensen?
Not familiar, but the question being...
I'm getting into it. I also love Joe Jorgensen. And by the way, these are female politicians that nobody is talking about. Okay, delete Tulsi, fine. Joe Jorgensen, saint.
Okay.
Essentially. How about comparatively? Because I don't think there are any saints in politics. But how do you justify... I didn't vote because I'm not for either of the main parties, that's for sure. I would have voted for Joe Jorgensen, but, you know, I'm Ohio, absentee, all this crap. So I was like, whatever. We're going to shit anyway. How do you justify the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden thing?
I don't have to justify it.
I mean, with their history.
I don't have to justify it.
Okay, what do you say to it?
What I say to it is that we will still hold them accountable in the same way that we hold Donald Trump accountable. So that's, to me, is the reason for why it is not for me, you know, to hold. I have nothing really to say about either one of them being in the position that they're in. They're in that position. We're still going to hold them accountable.
Well, I sure hope so.
Right.
That's good. Do you think that they're the best thing for this country right now?
I think anything is better than the Orange Menace.
Orange Menace. I called him the orange-haired ignoramus in an op-ed I wrote my freshman year at Rice. I would love for you to read it. I think you'd really like it. I'm worried because when we talk about Joe Biden and we talk about Kamala Harris, we talk in the media. I don't know how you talk about them, but in the mainstream narrative, we talk about them as saints. We talk about them as the people who are going to turn things around. But you go back and you look at the laws that you're talking about that they've put in that have disproportionately affected people of color. Kamala Harris put 1,560 people in jail from 2011 to 2016 for marijuana. She opposed softening sentences in California for minimal, crimes. Joe Biden doesn't want his kids in a racial jungle of a school. And I'm like, dang, how do we do that?
Once again, I have to operate in a system that I did not have a hand in creating.
And neither did we.
Exactly. So what we got to do is what we can do in operating within this system. And frankly, at least they're giving more opportunities to be able to operate in a way that Trump was not giving any of those types of opportunities to operate, especially for Black people.
Now, what was this guy's name? Michael Lomax. Do you know Michael Lomax?
Not familiar.
Michael Lomax is the head of the United College Negro Fund. And I'm not
United Negro College Fund.
United Negro College Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. One thing that was very interesting is that he sent out a personal thank you to Donald Trump because of Trump reinstating the HBCU, 255 millions. Does that go? And by the way, I'm not a Trumper. Just let that be clear. I just want to talk all sides. What does that say to you when you see Trump do something like that?
Once again, that is an action. One action that doesn't negate all the other things that Trump has done that definitely disproportionately negatively impacted Black people.
Well, we can talk about those. Do you want to
talk
about
Actually, I'm running out of time to be able to talk about it because we're already at 1:07.
Oh, cool.
I have another thing to do at 1:15.
Oh, okay.
Great. Well, I'm sorry about that. That's all good. I think we had a very interesting discussion today. Brandon, man, we are so happy you came. I appreciate you having this discussion. And from us, by the way, it's all love.
Mm-hmm.
We just love to get nitty gritty about everything. And your fellow Rice alum. But everybody, because we got to cut it. Episode 26, Houston Ensemble. We're going to link Brandon Mack in the description. We're going to link the Black Lives Matter Houston in the description. Thank you for coming. And we'll talk to you soon.
We'll catch you guys later.
Well, we just had episode 26 with BLM Houston leader Brandon Mack. And we decided to record a little addendum, a little afterthought, a little, what do you call it? Epilogue, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
Epilogue. I don't think an hour is nearly enough time
Mm-mm.
to achieve anything in this conversation. And I want to start off by simply saying the hour that he did give us is worth,
Invaluable.
it's invaluable because it's so difficult in this environment right now. What's going on, medically in this world, what's going on psychologically in this world to even come together like this and have a conversation. So for a leader of BLM to come down here and give us an hour, again, we'll never forget it, and we're extremely grateful for Brandon to come through. Now, the reason we wanted to make this addendum is because there's a couple of things that maybe we missed out on that I wanted to address, and then Chad will also address some things. So I think the crux of perhaps one of the confusions or maybe slight disagreements was that you cannot necessarily use individual experiences to get into a dialogue about the systemic racism and, the disparities in how Black people are treated in this country versus other races. I wanted to address this idea because I feel like it isn't entirely conducive towards a coherent or maybe proactive conversation, and this is why. At the end of the day, when we're talking about making policies, when we're talking about making specific legislation towards helping others, what we'll have to do is to have individual conversations. Even when we're talking about sweeping problems like systemic racism, there is no individual figure or entity that represents all of systemic racism, in its entirety. There are only the people that are involved and the institutions that perpetuate the cycle in question. So that means that we still need to be talking to the people. And so there will be the side that is inside the problem, inside the racism, and there will be the side outside of that, presumably me, presumably the individual who isn't Black. And the point I was trying to get at is that at the end of the day, as humans, we have more in common than we have different. My experience as an immigrant from Russia who didn't know English, who was bullied. Now, I don't really think about, I have a tough skin. My parents raised me with a tough skin. Yes, I was bullied a good amount. I was punched, I was choked, I was kicked, I was spat at, I was cursed at, all sorts of things. And I was called a cracker, honky. From my own Black friends, I was pushed away for reasons I didn't even understand. Now, to say that this perspective entirely doesn't matter or is irrelevant, I believe is a little short-sighted, because at the end of the day, I am trying to come to you from a perspective of I want to understand.
You're trying to empathize
and
as
I'm
well.
I'm trying to empathize. And I don't think it is productive to say, well, that's great, but your experiences are kind of irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, I had a tough time. So my Black friends, who I still love dearly, who, didn't have to deal with, I didn't call them anything. I didn't ostracize them. I didn't bully them, but it happened to me. And to say that that is irrelevant in this conversation, I think that's unfair. And so that's my first point. My last point is this. I guess this isn't really my last point. My second to last point is this. Armenian people were almost entirely wiped out a century ago by a people that hated us. And a lot of those people, maybe not the young ones, but the ones from older generations, still possess a hatred. everybody knows of a hatred. Everybody is the odd one out somewhere. Okay? Armenian people were Christians, lighter skinned in a land surrounded by another worldview. Muslims who were from a different kind of descent, from an Arabic descent. And that was a hatred that I went through. And you can go through all sorts of hatreds all around the world. And if we're really going to try to solve a problem like this, we must actually open up the dialogue completely, rather than insisting that this rhetoric is more serious than yours. Now, finally, to the last point. I think it's important that regardless of what organization you're in, that you do not create a dialogue full of jargon and full of exclusive words or words that are nebulous and difficult to define. So when you take, for example, slightly different situation, but Wall Street. When Wall Street creates a variety of jargon to describe simple arithmetic actions or arithmetic methods of making money, they're doing that to create exclusivity in their group so that you don't understand what's going on. There's no target for which to focus on and to understand the situation. And I think that a lot of organizations fall into this way of functioning. The language becomes nebulous, it becomes difficult to understand, and I think it's kind of, let me just wrap it up. For lack of a better word, it's once again not proactive towards the conversation. I don't know if you could seriously say that what I went through was not racist. And to call that simply prejudice, I think it's going into the realm of semantics, and I don't get the point of that. So
what I want to say is that, the point of this podcast is actually to, in this episode, highlight Brandon's thoughts, highlight the thoughts / the ideologies of Black Lives Matter, and we're extremely sympathetic to that and agree with essentially everything that he said. I think when it becomes confusing when you have a person like me essentially just wanting to, like you said, open up the entire dialogue and essentially try to account for everything. I don't like to be one-sided about anything. That's why I like to say, okay, Joe Biden, he's doing this. Great. Donald Trump, he did this. That's nice. Donald Trump did this. That's horrible. Joe Biden did this. That's also horrible. But in our society today, it seems like we're not even allowed to talk about positive things that the mainstream narrative doesn't want talked about. Whether it's about Donald Trump, reinstating the $255 million to the HBCUs or something along those lines. It's definitely hard for me to get into the semantics, especially, what we brought about in the earlier part of the conversation about racism. I don't see that creates an unlevel playing field when we're having a dialogue, because why are we changing the definition of racism on the spot? Like I said earlier, the official definition of racism is the belief that race accounts for differences in human character or ability, and that a particular race is superior to others.
Yeah.
That's the general universal held definition. And if one person or a group of people is going around saying that this is racism and this isn't, or black people cannot be racist, as he said. Black people can be prejudiced, but they cannot be racist. Well, then we got to change the dictionary.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on now.
Yeah,
we're on your side.
Yeah.
I'm here for you, and I'm all about eliminating racism and eliminating bigotry and all these things. But when you're not allowed to have a conversation, or, you know, the denizen of the matter decides to change the definition of the words we're using, well, then we can't even have the conversation.
Yeah. And now to go on a different angle, again, I'm going to have to bring up this point just to draw a comparison, a parallel. So 100 years ago, again, there was a genocide of the Armenian people. And as you can imagine, since then, the tensions have been hot. Armenians are still trying to get recognized by Turkey for doing that, because that would mean reparations, that would mean land given back to us, millions of dollars, etc., infrastructure being opened up, etc. So, and none of it was achieved. And so that creates resentment, right? But the problem with resentment is it puts you in a black hole. It puts you in an abyss. If you are in a state of resentment, and I'm just speaking for my Armenian people, you are actually putting yourself in a debilitated position. If you're angry, it's like, think about it like a relationship. Let's say you went through a bad relationship and you just you needed to be fair. You need that closure. You need them to give back this and give your $3,000 from that, and they still have your sweater and blah, blah, blah. At a certain point, that hatred seeps into the psychology of the people. I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. I think you've told me about it, even with how your parents think about it.
With how my parents think. My parents say some wacky stuff just because they're upset about what happened 100 years ago.
And rightfully so.
Wacky things, you know what I'm saying, that I would say are actually racist things, but towards the people in question in this conflict.
The people who are killing their people.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, you can't fight fire with fire.
Mm-mm.
You just can't do it. I know that. And look, it's really difficult, because how are you going to sit in front of your enemy and be nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the guy you think is your enemy. But hey, guess what? You're going to have to do that. So at a certain point, the Armenians are going to have to look past it and just focus on themselves and lift themselves up. And then as a people, as a spirit, lift themselves up, and then they can actually achieve so much. Then the world will be like, hey, look at them being productive, proactive. And that tends to be the experience in general. When you're productive and you're proactive and you're not negative, all of a sudden that old relationship, it doesn't control your future anymore. All of a sudden there's fruitful things happening all around you. But if we center the dialogue around, no, you suck. Please remember, you suck. And I have it the worst. I don't think that hasn't worked for my people. And I'm thinking it's not going to really work out here. And to be perfectly honest, inherently as human beings, as citizens, I think we're very aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're very aware that it's not going to work.
Yep.
And a lot of us are very aware that what we're facing, at least to a certain percent, is what I would call manufactured dissent, manufactured conflict. And I'm aware of these things because guess what? Soviet Union control of language, Soviet Union control of ideology, of thoughts, that's a very recent phenomenon for me and my family. We remember it like it was yesterday. We know how the gradual control of language can all of a sudden drastically change the political and social dynamic of an entire country. And the Germans know this from World War II, not too long ago. And I'm just thinking that what's happening, unfortunately, is good efforts are being mixed in with malintent.
Yeah.
And it's getting really messy.
And another thing is that the way that the narrative is being spun by not spun. The way that the narrative is being put by the people today is it's essentially the citizens' fault for everything that is happening. It's everybody's personal fault, and to some extent it is. But what I think a lot of people maybe don't think, but I think it's what you and I think, is that unfortunately we really don't have a say. It's not whites versus blacks in America. It's not Mexicans versus blacks. It's the top versus the bottom. And it's the 1%ers versus everybody else, because they're going to do whatever it takes to get their money and their power. And yeah, a lot of them are white, no doubt about that. But there are also plenty of black people and other races as well. And of course, I know it's dominated by white people. I'm not saying it's not. But it's so much more clear to me that this isn't on an individual basis in general. This is not from a top to bottom basis. And Armin and I love all people. And I think Brandon loves all people. And I think the majority of people love all people. I haven't met somebody who's like truly racist. Yeah, I've never met somebody personally who's truly racist or white supremacist.
Yeah, we wouldn't even, like humor that circle, so we're not.
Right. And if we did, we'd bring them on the podcast and we'd say, tell us why you think this and why you think you're justified. We just want to have extremely open conversations because you're not allowed to do that today as much. It seems like you're not allowed to do that.
No, you're not allowed to do that. What ends up happening instead is you get a downvote on a little virtual button and some virtual comment that's very angry, and then that's the end of that. And what the good does that do? So I hope that you guys at least like give us a chance and understand where we're coming from, because we're very serious about this. We're not coming at this willy-nilly like we're just trying to like create a ruckus. We're really, like, I would say to an extent, desperate to see some amount of solidarity in this country.
Yes.
I'm really tired of watching people pitted against each other. Like, I'm tired of not being able to say things to my own friends. It's just really wacky. It's like my mind is being controlled before I even think. And that is a phenomenon that is a very Orwellian phenomenon. And it's really coming into fruition. It used to be a meme, Orwell's coming, the age of 84, it's coming. It's not a meme anymore. It's like right around the corner. Every single person feels it in like their computer desks or just outside and in the corner store.
And can I add on to that? Yeah. Just because I want to put it in here. A New York Times article came out the other day where this journalist was talking to, just reference for what he said, experts. And the experts recommended that the Biden administration put in a reality czar, hire a reality czar. And that's essentially what you're talking about. 1984, we have the Ministry of Truth, which is controlling the media, controlling what is put out. It sounds like some stuff that China does today. You're not allowed to use Facebook and stuff like that. They control the internet. Yeah, we don't want a bunch of disinformation. We don't want all this crazy stuff. But the best way to fight bad information is with more information, not censorship of ideas. And our goal is to unite everybody as one, because we know we already are. Yeah. And it's the powers at the top that are trying to divide everybody. And at that, there is no more race. Yeah. It's how much cash do you have?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if you think that one billionaire with 50 billion who's black and the other guy that's white, if at that point you think they're still concerned over their race, no. Like, money talks in such a way, and we need to, if we're gonna make enemies of anybody, I don't want to make enemy, like, I don't want to be like, rally towards against the 1% together. Like that's nice, but it's deeper than that because it's not about making everybody the same income level or whatever. It's just, let's just start with not being so hostile in simple conversations. Let's just start with that.
And let's be very empirical about it. Like Brandon said, let's hold people accountable. Whether it is a citizen, whether it's like some, sort of white supremacist guy, hold him accountable for his moral wrongdoings of hurting other people or going out of his way to try and hurt other people. But at the same time, let's hold Kamala Harris and Joe Biden accountable for their actions in the past, just like we hold all other politicians accountable, because they certainly have not done things to aid in the progress of the black community. A lot of other people have not as well, but we just have to be able to be honest about it. I think, this is a good addendum. We just want to say, here at Houston Ensemble Podcast, we are truly all about love and unity and art and creativity and the oneness of the soul.
Yeah. And like you said, we already believe, like, inherently we're intertwined, like energetically, spiritually, and the reason we don't feel like we're intertwined is because of all the superfluous fluff that we're dealing with. And so before you hit that dislike button on this, okay, give us a chance and maybe leave a comment if you're really upset about something we're saying, and let us know. We have the ability right now to really respond to everybody because we're still a small channel and we're growing. And we want to be at the forefront. We want to be one of the podcasts that are really trying to open up dialogue. Mm-hmm. So please
let us know what you think.
Let us know
if you have somebody that you think we should have on or have a discussion with, let us know. We'd love to do it. We want all opinions to be had on here. But thank you guys for watching. This was episode 26. We've got amazing episodes coming up with some very serious people. Thanks so much.